Alrighty, folks, so we are going to go ahead and do our forces and motion Kahoot. Let's see what my name is going to be. I am going to be a fuzzy sable. Sounds fun. Alrighty, let's do this. So, let's get to the first question. Which of the following is an example of units for velocity? So remember that velocity needs to include speed and direction, so that is going to be meters per second north. All right. Next up, we have, which of the following is not an example of acceleration? All right, well, acceleration is a change in velocity or a change in direction, and change in velocity would include speeding up. So meters per second is just a velocity, and so that is going to be not an acceleration. All right. Next, which of the following would not be labeled in newtons? So we are looking for something that is not a force. All right, well, friction is a force that opposes all motion, the force of gravity. Weight is going to be the acceleration of gravity multiplied by mass. Inertia, however, is Newton's first law, more or less. An object in motion stays in motion unless acted upon by an unbalanced force. The idea that objects maintain motion, that is inertia, and it is not a force. All right, next up. What force opposes motion? All right, well, the force that opposes motion is going to be friction. It is always moving in the opposite direction of any motion. All right, next up. A change in which of the following affects the weight of an object? Well, as we said earlier, weight is equal to the acceleration of gravity multiplied by mass, and so we are looking for acceleration due to gravity here since mass is not an option. Alrighty. Next up, we have, for every action there is a, this is Newton's third law, and that is going to be, there is a reaction force, or an equal opposite reaction. All right, next up. A change in motion is due to what? Alrighty. Well, let's take a look at this. Inertia is the fact that motion, or an object in motion stays in motion, and it'll stay in motion if the forces are balanced, resulting in a constant velocity. The change in motion is due to an unbalanced force acting on the object. All right, next. If a baseball bat hits a ball with force of 15 newtons, with what force will the ball hit the bat? All right, this is Newton's third law. For every action, there is an equal and opposite reaction. So that means that the reaction force is going to be equal to the original force, so 15 newtons. Next, what are the units for mass? So remember that mass is the amount of matter in an object, and it is not a force. So this is actually going back to one of our original units, and that would be kilograms. Newtons is a force, meters per second is a velocity, and kilograms times meters per second squared is a force. We'll get to that in a second, though. All right, next up. What are the units for force? All right, so the units for force, we just said, are actually going to be measured in newtons. Kilograms are mass or meters per second squared is acceleration, and kg times ms would be, or m over s, that would be mass times velocity. So that is not a force. All right, next. Which of the following are units for weight? Well, remember that we said that weight is equal to mass times acceleration due to gravity, and so because that is a force, that means that weight is measured in newtons. Kilograms is mass, and mass is the amount of matter that makes up an object, whereas weight is the force exerted downwards. All right, next. Which of the following is equivalent to a Newton? All right, this is Newton's second law. Newton's measure force, so force equals mass times acceleration. So we look at this, all these have mass, but this is mass times velocity. Kilograms times meters per second squared is mass times acceleration. So that is going to be your Newton. All right, next up. For every action, there is an equal and opposite reaction. What law is this? That would be Newton's third law. First law, an object in motion stays in motion. Second law, force equals mass times acceleration. Third law is every action, there's an equal and opposite reaction. I'm not aware of Newton's 99th law, but hey, if you know about it, let me know. All right, next up. What property of matter resists a change in motion? All right, this is going to be inertia. That is Newton's first law, that an object in motion stays in motion unless acted upon by an unbalanced force. But that idea of an object in motion stays in motion is what we call inertia. All right, next up. What is the maximum velocity during a free fall? So we talked about this early on in the unit, but this is going to be at a certain point you keep accelerating due to gravity, but then the friction from air resistance becomes equal and opposite to that force, resulting in what we call terminal velocity. All right, next up. We're getting close here. A train takes 2 hours to travel 80 kilometers. What is its speed? Speed is determined by doing distance divided by time. 80 kilometers divided by 2 hours would be 40, and the unit would be kilometers per hour. Alrighty, next up. A sprinter starts at rest and reaches a final velocity of 20 meters per second after 10 seconds. What is her acceleration? All right, in this example, acceleration is determined by the change in velocity divided by time. Well, you start at rest and you reach 20 meters per second, so that means we had a 20 meters per second change in velocity, and we divide that by 10 seconds, giving us an answer of 2, and the unit is going to be meters per second, or meters per second squared. And what that means is every second the runner or the sprinter's velocity increased by 2. So after 1 second, the velocity was 2 meters per second. After 5 seconds, the velocity was 10 meters per second, and after 10 seconds, the velocity was 20 meters per second, which would be very fast. All right, next up. Last question. What is the weight of a 55 kilogram person on the moon? Gravity on the moon is 1.6 meters per second. All right. Well, in this case, we are going to use Newton's second law, and we're going to turn that into the weight equation, which is weight equals mass times the acceleration due to gravity. So we're going to take this number 55 kilograms and we're going to multiply it by 1.6 meters per second, and that is going to give us 88, and the correct unit is newtons. A pound, while that is a weight, it is a different unit. It is a completely different system of measurement. The unit that we use for weight in metric is newtons. Alrighty, folks. So that is the answers and explanations for this Kahoot. If you have any questions, please reach out to your teacher.